basically had 4 years to regroup, and that's what they did. We had a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, and these groups are still present there. They're still training there. There is no shortage of radical groups in places like Egypt, where this individual traveled to. They're all over the world, and it's just a matter of time.
Can you give us an update on what the latest is on the events in New Orleans?
Yes, sir. It's kind of unexpected and very interesting, and at the same time very alarming that there apparently is a connection between the attackers involved in the attack in New Orleans and in Las Vegas. They used, for example, the same app to rent the vehicle that was used during the attack. They apparently were comrades at the same military base, so that certainly suggests. I mean, it's not 100%, but the overwhelming probability is that they were acting in concert, and that in and of itself is very alarming.
And what about the connection to ISIS? Why does this look like a terrorist attack?
Well, they at least with respect to the NOLA attacker, there was an ISIS flag in the vehicle. And apparently there were concerning posts prior to the attack as well. And you're going to find, when they go through his history, his emails and social media, they're going to find a link there that he was acting probably, almost certainly with respect to an ideology that is aligned with ISIS.
And logistically, how did he carry out this attack? How sophisticated was it? I know that the police found various pipe bombs filled with nails and things like that around various patrol cars where the attack happened. So what's the level of sophistication in this attack in New Orleans?
I would come at that from two different angles. The sophistication was very, very low, but that doesn't suggest that even a weapon that is rudimentary can still be effective. It can still achieve its desired aim. It does suggest planning and preparation. So not everyone's going to be a sophisticated bomb maker. However, he drove through a crowd and created such carnage. It really doesn't take any sophistication to do something like that. So, yes, it might have been worse if there was greater sophistication, at least in the bomb making process. But you don't really need that to harm a lot of people.
From your perspective as an expert, do you think that he could have carried this attack out by himself, or does it look like there's more people involved?
Well, that's the question they're trying to get to the bottom of today. Could he have done it himself? Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, what do? You need to rent a car, acquire weapons, acquire body armor, drive to make your unsophisticated pipe bombs, and then drive to the location that you are targeting. So that could have certainly been done by so-called lone wolf attacker. But then, of course, we find that on the same day, basically, we have another attack with a lot of similarities, and there's apparently a connection between the two. Now that's either outside direction to both these people, or at least some concerted effort between the two attackers. My suspicion is we're going to find that when the first attacker, the attacker who went to Egypt, that's when marching orders were probably given. I'm hoping that Egyptian authorities can make some headway, at least as far as the movements that occurred when he was there. But we haven't heard anything about that yet.
Trump has come out and criticized the DOJ and the FBI under Joe Biden, and he's promised kind of stronger border patrol, stronger immigration policies, but also a stronger DOJ. Was there anything that the DOJ or the FBI or law enforcement in general could have done to prevent these attacks? Do you think this was a failure?
That's a complicated question. I think, I have a lot of criticism for the DOJ under this administration. For example, this DOJ was very, very fast to say, we have a problem within the military with respect to white supremacists. But they would absolutely push back against any suggestion that there might be some radical Islamists in the military with the same potential for danger to the American public. That is outrageous. I mean, that's a selective worldview impacting on national security. So that's one thing. With respect to this case, I don't know. I mean, there are cases like, for example, the Boston bombing, where I believe the FBI absolutely blew it. They had the guy, they had him identified. They did not deconflict and look at other agencies that actually had information on the Tsarnaev brothers, at least the elder Tsarnaev brother, which would have at least changed the outcome with respect to their investigation onto that person. So they dropped the ball there. This one, I'm not sure. Where I would, if there's any fault to be laid, local law enforcement, when you're securing an area like the Bourbon Street, you need to look at what the New York City Police Department does when they do that massive million-plus people event every year at Times Square. You don't have to put in bollards. I mean, they were talking about, but the bollards weren't ready, the barricades weren't ready. Who cares? You have city garbage trucks. You put them at extensions, and you make it impossible for a vehicle to pass. Apparently, they had a police car at an intersection. For what? To deter law-abiding individuals. Someone with an intent to harm, like this person, just veered around the car and then struck the crowd. So physical obstruction is something that is just in this case was not present and should have been.
To what extent do you think ISIS, the Islamic State, is a threat to America today? It seemed like there weren't as many terrorist attacks from these kind of Islamist groups being carried out in recent years. So this may have come as a shock to many Americans.
Well, they basically had 4 years to regroup, and that's what they did. We had a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, and these groups are still present there. They're still training there. There is no shortage of radical groups in places like Egypt, where this individual traveled to. They're all over the world, and it's just a matter of time. It just takes enough. You don't need to be tremendously organized, but you need enough of an organization to be attractive to people like these individuals who may say, you know what, this is a group with an ideology that I find attractive, and I want to get involved. And in this case, big surprise, but it's not surprising the people who actually follow these things. It's just a matter of time.
And what can the Trump DOJ do to prevent these kind of attacks in the future?
First of all, in government agencies, and it's not just the military, it's law enforcement, it's our State Department, you have people who need to be looked at as far as their allegiances to other people. For example, I don't know if that person was arrested yet, but there was a State Department employee who leaked Israeli attack plans on Iran. This person was linked to Iran. How does that happen? When I became, if you're going to become a DEA agent or an FBI agent, you take a polygraph. You would think at some point when you're handling sensitive materials, you should do that. And by the way, it can be done repeatedly, every 3 years, every 5 years. So we need to really look at that and start making sure people with access to sensitive information or training that could be used against us, they need to be looked at and said, you know what, this person is questionable. We don't want this person in the military or the DOJ or whatever agency it is. So that's one thing they can absolutely do in addition to securing the border.
Let's talk about this attack in Las Vegas outside the Trump Hotel. This former veteran blew up his Tesla Cybertruck. What do you make of that attack? Why do you think, a few people were injured. Fortunately, no one died other than the person in the car. What's your observation on this attack? Why do you think it happened?
This is just supposition, but it seems to be a reasonable conclusion. So you have the conversions of two personalities here. You have Trump, you have the hotel, and you have using a Tesla Cybertruck. We have Elon Musk, and we know the connection now between Musk and Trump. So that's kind of a bit of a statement where it worked to the advantage of the general public is the person forgot the Cybertruck is a very robust vehicle. It has armored windows. It's structurally very, very strong. And what happened was, I don't know if you ever noticed, there are certain containers that are bomb-proof. You see them in Europe. You'll see them in Israel. So if someone were to drop an explosive device in a trash can, for example, they're designed to direct the force of the explosion upward, not outward, so individuals wouldn't be harmed by shrapnel. The Cybertruck, in this instance, served the exact same purpose. It was so structurally sound that if you look at those photographs, the explosion went up, and that's why we didn't have greater numbers of injured or worse.
Do you think that if this was a politically motivated attack, Trump needs to be properly protected, in an even more intense way than he is now? I know that last year he had 2 failed assassination attempts. Do you expect there to be more attacks like this perhaps even on Trump himself as he becomes president?
That is a fear that I have. If you consider the attack in Butler, Pennsylvania, I mean, literally a fraction of a second or an inch change, the president would have been killed. So, and that's by some amateur who managed in the sight of law enforcement to get a vantage point to shoot from. Imagine if you had trained individuals with a concerted effort and funding from a nation state like Iran or another one of our enemies. Yeah, that could be a whole different ballgame, and I certainly hope the Secret Service is taking those possible attack scenarios into account. I'm quite sure they are, but to your point, absolutely, I do fear for the president, and I think they should make their security plans accordingly.
The president-elect, as I said earlier, has been talking a lot about border security in his criticism of the DOJ after these attacks. How do you think the border will change under Trump from a national security perspective? Do you think that, obviously the border has been a huge issue over the last 4 years. We've even had ISIS terrorists being arrested coming over, I believe from Canada. So how should Trump make America safer through his border policies?
Just simply go back to what was in place before Biden took office. I mean, from a federal law enforcement standpoint, during the final months of the Trump administration, we had the securest border in history. It's not a matter of it's more secure in history. The number of encounters with Border Patrol and illegal aliens was drastically lowered. So now the number is widely varied. You have 7 million, 10 million, 15 million. The fact of the matter is we have no idea. If you can get it back to where it was, will there still be people sneaking across the border? Yes, you're not going to eliminate that entirely, but they're going to be in the handfuls rather than the thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions.
I have to ask, because you're in the DEA, what kind of threats does America face at the moment from drugs, from fentanyl going over the border?
It's a national poisoning epidemic. People think, it's an overdose. I mean, the drug addicts overdosing. Fentanyl, in this case, this is poison. So, and that's by the way, the increase in fentanyl poisoning is directly related to the porosity of the border. Okay, and by the way, another point you raise with respect to the drug angle, these terror groups abroad, much of their funding is generated through the narcotics trade. Now, I had cases 30 years ago where Hezbollah, in conjunction with Iran and Syria, they were counterfeiting, but they were also they were transporting heroin and trading heroin for cocaine, making hundreds and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars to fund terrorism. So that's another point. That's a great question.
Final question. I don't know if you've seen the film or the series Narcos on Netflix. Maybe you have, but this was back in the 80s. They were trying to deal with Pablo Escobar and the cocaine epidemic. How has the DEA kind of changed since the 80s and the 90s? People say that war on drugs was a lost war. What's your view on that transformation to today?
Well, certainly we're putting a lot fewer people in handcuffs. Certainly it's difficult. Once you cede control of the border, you're basically saying we no longer can limit, or we had our finger in the dike. Now we pulled the finger out. So the flood of narcotics into the country was just extraordinary. So from that standpoint, the availability of drugs, the price of drugs are down. It's just tremendously increased. Once the border was opened. So I mean, what they need to do is go back to the old DEA policy. The DEA doesn't control the border. It used to be customs. Now it's ICE. So you have those guys controlling the border, and then in addition to that, you have DEA follow up where the shipments, where the smugglers were going to go to, what groups they were going to be involved in. So it's old-fashioned law enforcement. Track the groups, track the money, and just do what we used to do. We used to, I remember in New York City as an agent. There was never a time of day when agents were not on the street bringing in people in handcuffs. And that's certainly not been the case in the last few years.
Thank you for watching this video. If you want to watch more, content, please subscribe to our new GBN America YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.